Well, good morning, everybody. How are y'all doing? Y'all doing all right? Hey, my name is Tyler Jagan, and before I start speaking, I want to, first of all, apologize to you. I've been dealing with this just really ugly head cold, and so if I'm coughing into the mic and all that sort of stuff, man, please forgive me. It's been a really rough 2020 for me. I've just already been sick. How many of you guys already started 2020 sick? Am I the only person with the, yeah, man, everybody. Yeah, and so one of the things I've learned through this whole, last week is there's lots of things that I want to get done. There's a lot of things I want to do, and I find myself just, like Thursday, I was just sick all day. I was just in bed for the most part and just being really agitated. I can't go do the things that I need to do, and I'm not as mentally sharp, and I find myself making mistakes last week that just really kind of bother me. But then I realize that what God does in those moments is just to help me to recognize that my life isn't about me. My life isn't about my greatness and my productivity and my whatever and get everything right. It's really about slowing down sometimes, and God makes us slow down, right? In order to recognize that, hey, He's in control. He's more powerful than me. I'm not as great. And God tends to show His goodness even through those moments. And so I'm very grateful. But I apologize if I start coughing or anything like that. Well, we're in this series that Caleb started last week called Shooting for Average. Now, first of all, it's important to understand that when we talk about shooting for average, we're not talking about shooting for mediocrity. We're not talking about, just doing things ho-hum. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about really is just really pushing back. Starting 2020, we're just really pushing back on this whole cultural idea that we all need to be great, that our life isn't worth anything unless we're people of great significance. And oftentimes we strive through our whole lives trying to be great, trying to be somebody, right? And then what usually happens with a lot of us, maybe some of us don't really deal with that, but a lot of us, we get to around 40 years old, and all of those dreams that we had when we were kids that we thought someday we're going to be great. I'm going to be an Olympian. I'm going to be a professional athlete. I'm going to be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company and all of those things. And then you realize that you're not that fast, you're not as strong, or you're in middle management, and now you feel like instead of being a somebody, you're kind of a nobody in this. And so what we wanted to do was just to kind of push back on that idea, the idea that life is really meant about striving for greatness, to become great and significant. Because honestly, when you look at it from God's point of view, that's not what His desire was for us anyways. In fact, it's a very ungodly idea. And so when we think about average is really just dealing with the reality that every single one of us, when it comes to the vastness of all knowledge, of all understanding, when it comes to the vastness of the cosmos, of the universe, and everything that's in it, and all those things throughout all of time, we are very, very average. Now, we may compare against each other and say, well, maybe I'm greater than you in this area or greater than you in that area, but even in that reality comes a point in all of our lives that there's still a 100% mortality rate. None of us is greater than getting away from death, all right? And so what we wanted to do was to take the edge off of needing to be great and basically maybe living life a little bit differently, a life that I believe, and what God would say, would bring us a lot more joy and fulfillment, and also greater blessings to other people as well in our lives. So when I think of average, I think of it like this. Average, define it like this. Average is the freedom from the obsession of greatness, all right? Kind of a disease that I call significantitis. That I suffer from this chronic need for my life to be significant, for my life to be great, and not really recognizing that for me to be great and for me to be significant, I really need you guys not to be great and not to be significant so I can rise above it and feel great about myself. That tends to be how it really goes when we kind of look under the cover on this. So when I think of significantitis, I kind of define it as this: the false belief that the worth of one's life is determined by the achievement of some grand objective. That the false belief that the worth of your life, of my life, is determined by the achievement of some grand, huge, major objective. Our culture, in many ways, teaches our young people that, back in the old days, maybe getting a good paying job to be able to take care of your family, to love your family, be part of the community and whatnot is not enough, okay? Anything less than changing the world means your life is a failure. It's more than just going and getting a good paying job and loving your family. It's about you got to go out there and change the world. And if you're not out there changing the world, then your life isn't significant. You're not great. That makes you a nobody. All right? And so that feels very depressing, doesn't it? And then when you sit there and you say, well, wait a minute, not to be great. Well, let's look at what David said. David, it's interesting when you look at some great people. People have accomplished a lot of amazing, cool things. That when they think of the term of greatness and being great, and they take a pause and they step back and they look at life objectively, they too tend to think that maybe we're not as great as we thought. Even though I may be king of a whole nation, maybe I'm not as great as I thought I am. David said it like this in Psalm 8, 3-4. He said, when I look at the night sky, when I look up, and that usually begins to help us to make us feel a little bit more insignificant when we look up into the night sky. When I look into the night sky and see the work of your fingers, the moon, the stars that you set in place, what are mere mortals? What are people? I love the illustration that Caleb said last week when he was flying back from Michigan, when he was flying over, and he looked down, and he didn't see any of us from 8,000 feet. And he couldn't even recognize our own homes. Now, you think about looking down at us from, millions of miles away. You may not even be able to see us, even with a very powerful telescope, And so we're so insignificant. And here's the thing. Here's the reality. And the reality is this. You never have to worry about being insignificant. You know why? Because you already are insignificant when it comes to the grand schemes of eternal things and things of this world. That's kind of depressing, isn't it? Now think about it this way. Another person that we would deem in this world great. When you think of great, you think of the Roman emperors are pretty great. They did incredible things. Well, the Roman emperor and philosopher Marcus Aurelius, when he was talking about death, said this. He said, in a while you will be no one and nowhere, as are Hadrian and Augustus. Augustus, the first emperor of the Roman Empire. There'll be nowhere and no one. Life will just go on. Everybody will forget it. We'll just keep going. In other words, Marcus Aurelius was saying that there's this idea that even when I think that I'm great and I've accomplished this greatness of being the most powerful person of the greatest empire, the moment that I die or step aside and somebody steps in and whatever, man, it's all gone. It's over. I'm nowhere and no one. But I think, though, the reason why I bring this up is not to depress you, but to say there's a different way of understanding life that actually gives you a lot more comfort, a lot more joy, a lot more purpose than the striving of the needing to be this subjective thing called great, okay? One of the things that I love is these words that Jesus once said, that maybe life isn't so much about being great, but this. He said this, he said, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. I don't know about you, but my constant need to be great is burdensome. My constant need to be significant really wears me out, okay? It's a lot of work. I'm not even really good at it. And so it creates all sorts of other things in me that burdens me, and it's wearisome. And even when I feel or I experience a sense of moniker of success, then I feel this sense of stress in order to maintain it. Or this creepy little thing comes into me of ego and pride, and that's burdensome as well. But Jesus says, instead of trying to be great, why don't you just come to me, all you are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest, and take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. How many of you for 2020 would love to find rest for your souls? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be just nice to find some just rest? Rest in your souls. But Jesus is inviting us to come to him. That maybe life isn't so much meant to be about pursuing greatness as it is as much as pursuing Jesus Christ in a relationship with him and learning from him. And through learning from him and just simply doing what he asks us and tells us to do, we find rest for our souls. And one of the things I love about Jesus is Jesus says a lot of things that are like, I call them Jesus mind tricks, like a Jedi mind trick. It's like a Jesus mind trick. Jesus says things where when you read it, you just kind of sit there and you scratch your head and go, wait a minute, I don't get that. Well, Matthew 18:4, Jesus said this, so anyone who becomes as humble as a little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. In other words, what Jesus was telling his disciples, and this is really interesting, was that they came to him asking, what does it mean to be great in your kingdom? So that was really the conversation. What does it mean to be great in your kingdom? Well, he says, anyone who becomes humble as a little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Now, I don't know if you're anything like me, but my first thought is, okay, so now in order for me to be great, because I want to be great, I'm going to be humble. And then you kind of sit there and you kind of go, well, wait a minute, how does that work? How does, my desire to be great and amazing find its way to being humble? And Jesus does these kind of like Jesus mind tricks about how these two things fit together. But one of the things that you find with Jesus is that really greatness, you know what greatness is? Greatness is not caring about being great. Greatness is just being humble. It's just living your life of humility. It's releasing the obsession and the need for being great. And so Jesus says that's what it means. It's not about trying to be great. Now, they listened to that a little bit, but it didn't last very long, because soon after that, two of the guys, James and John, their mama came to Jesus, asking Jesus if one could sit on his right hand and one could sit on his left hand. In other words, who could be the number 2, number 3 man in the kingdom of God, to be the great ones here, which I really think is kind of funny, right? Isn't it kind of funny that, in order to be great, you ask your mama to go ask Jesus if you can sit there right, left? It's really kind of funny to me. So anyways, Jesus addresses this, and he says, in that passage there, he said, hey guys, that's what the world does. The world is amped up about being great, but not my kingdom. My kingdom doesn't operate that way. We don't even really care about being great. That's not our objective. That's not our goal. That's not what we go after. And so it shouldn't be yours either. In fact, Jesus goes and he says, that's not my objective either. Jesus didn't come into the world aspiring to be great, okay? Or aspiring to be significant. He just came in this world to be faithful to his Father and do whatever his Father wanted him to do, and to enjoy the presence and the fullness of that relationship that he had with his Father. And so Jesus says this in Matthew 20:28. He says this, he says, for even the Son of Man didn't come to be served, okay? But what? But to serve others and to give his life for a ransom for many. And that's Jesus. And so Jesus is saying, hey, I didn't come here to be great. I came here to serve. And what's interesting about Jesus, if you go and you look at Isaiah 53, Isaiah was a prophecy that the prophet Isaiah wrote 700 years before Jesus was born, talking about the Messiah. And it's amazing. You should go home and read it sometime. You'll sit there and go, whoa, 700 years before Jesus, that's incredible. But one of the things that it said in that was that Jesus was a very normal appearance, that in his appearance we would esteem him not, in other words. In other words, what Isaiah was saying was that when Jesus came on the scene, he was very, what we would call in our terms, in our worldly terms, he was very average. He was a very average individual. In fact, when we go and we meet Christ and we stand before him face to face, if we're still in our fleshly mind, you know what our first thought is probably going to be for most of us is, he's pretty average looking. I really thought of him as a lot more better looking than that, But he was average. He was born into an average family, into an average town, right? And his goal was not to be great. It was to be faithful to God, which obviously made him great, right? But he wasn't aspiring to that. And so what we see here is that even Jesus Christ, he was not obsessed with greatness like the Roman emperors and presidents of the United States, and for many of us, even in our own little world that we try to be. He was different. And so God is calling us to be different. Different in the sense of, instead of trying to be great, releasing that need and enjoying the God who made us in learning to live a life of trust. That the significance of life is not our significance. The significance of life is learning to trust a good God who created us, who desires a relationship with us. Not even for today and tomorrow, but for all eternity. And so we're going to look at a couple of different people here in the book of Ruth. So Caleb started off with Ruth. We decided we wanted to do Ruth because Ruth is a beautiful picture of what it means for an average person to take great joy in the Lord and see God move within her life. A lot of times when we look through scripture, we see this person became great, this person became great, this person became great. And so we have this in our mind that if I follow Jesus and I become humble, then I will become great. And the reality is that all of these people that were elevated to places of national influence, none of them, go look at them, none of them aspired to greatness. They were just humbly following the Lord. It wasn't about that. You could care less. Paul was the same way. So you see this all the way through. But here you see this gal who's not even Israelite, which is really amazing to me. Of all the New Testament books, this is the only person who has a name for their book who was not even an Israelite. And not only was she an Israelite, she was a foreigner who was a foreigner coming from the nation of Moab. As Caleb said last week, Moabba comes from the Hebrew word Mohabba, which means son of my dad, all right? Meaning the daughter had an incestual relationship with her dad, and they had a child. And she named her child Moab because that was the son of her dad through her. So you had this nation that was built up from that. And so you would see that not only was she maybe not average, but to an Israelite, she may have been perceived as being below average, But here's the thing. This isn't a rags to riches story. This isn't a idea that she comes and she becomes this queen of Israel or anything like that. No, in fact, she stays pretty ordinary throughout her life. But what you see in her life is this beautiful relationship that is cultivated and grown with her God, which makes us all kind of go, oh, good, there's hope for us. For us, all of us mortals, all of us average people, that we can have a very fulfilled, meaningful life by just simply enjoying the God who made us and created us and beginning a life of trusting him. But one of the things that you're going to learn from this is about this trust, is how we go about this whole process of trusting God and why this is so important. So let me kind of give you the backdrop of this here in Ruth chapter 1. I don't want to go over it because we read it because it would take too much time, but this is kind of the gist of it. If y'all remember, just kind of go back to the very beginning, there was a guy named Elimelech who had a wife named Naomi, and there was a famine in the land, so there was no food there. So if you're hungry, you got to go where the food is, and so they leave and they go to Moab. They have two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and they get married and they marry two foreigners, two Moabite women. One marries Orpah, the other one marries Ruth. And so tragedy happens. Elimelech dies, and the two boys die, which leaves all the three women together. And in an ancient world where they don't have a welfare system like we do, they're on their own. They're destitute, and they're more than destitute. It's a really dire position to be in. There are no job opportunities for them. It's agrarian society. It's only to the strongest and to the best that they're going to be hired. And so there's no opportunity for them to be able to take care of themselves. So they're in a really bad spot. But they hear good news that God is beginning to bless the people of Israel again, and there's food again. And so Naomi, the matriarch, says, you know what, it's time to go back. And so the girls say, we'll go with you. And so they start going. And so but Naomi goes, no, you girls need to go back home. Go back home. You're foreigners. I don't know if I can get you married. And if I were to marry and have a son by which to grow up, for you to marry, to take care of you, it's never going to happen. You see, back in those days, for a woman, they really needed to get married in order to be able to be provided for. And she's basically, Naomi, saying, there's none of that. I'm going back empty-handed. I may very well die of my own starvation there as a destitute widow woman back in my land, let alone you coming as a couple of Moabite women. And so one of them, Orpah, basically says, yeah, maybe it's best to go back. And so she does. And the other one, Ruth, says, okay, I'm going to go with you. And so Ruth and Naomi go back into the land. But here's the thing that I want to kind of break down with the time that I have with you here is this. And what you're going to see is two different people and two different decisions. Orpah's and Ruth's decision. But one of the things that's so important for us to understand when it comes to living a life of trust, giving up the need for greatness and living a life of trust, giving up the life of ease and giving into the life of trust in God is this. Trust isn't always the easiest, but it's always the best. It's always the best. It's not always easy, but it is the best. And so here in Ruth, chapter 1, verse 8, it says this, but on the way, Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, so she's going back to Israel, like I said, and she says to them, go back. In fact, she says to them 3 times, return, return, return. Go back. This is a bad deal for you. You don't want to come with me. I have nothing to offer you. There's nothing in it for you. This is not good. You need to go back. So he says, go back to your mother's home. Why? Because they can take care of you there. You're going into a foreign land to Israelites who don't necessarily look up to you guys that much. And so I don't even know what may even happen to you. Just go home. It's a lot safer. It's a lot easier. Go home. And so she goes on and he says, and may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to me. May God just reward you for what you've done for me and for my boys. And then he says this in verse 9. She says this, may the Lord bless you with security of another marriage. In other words, what Naomi is saying is, man, I hope that you go back, go to your mom's, be under their umbrella, and I hope you find some good guys to be able to take care of you in this culture, and that you'll be all right, that you'll find good security in all of that. And then she kissed him goodbye, and they broke down and wept. In verse 14, it goes on, it says, and again, they wept together, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. And so Orpah turned and said, you know what, that sounds about right. I think I'm going to go home. This is way too hard. Why do I want to go to Israel? I don't even know if this is safe for me to be there, but it's a lot easier for me to go and go home. But here's the thing. Here's the thing with this. Ruth makes a different decision. This other Moabite woman, she makes a different decision. And it's a game changer in her life. In fact, it is a life-changing decision for her. Instead of making the decision to go back to what was easiest and go back home, she decided that she wanted to go with Naomi and to go and be with her God and be and do life with her, which meant no matter what happens, that she would go and she would do this. Now, why would she do that? Knowing that she may very well die going to Israel. She did it because she loved Naomi. And one of the things that when you go and you read through this, and I hope that all of you do over this next week, it's just 4 chapters. It's a beautiful little book that you would go back, that you would see that she begins to trust Naomi's God, the living God. And so what you see with her is really that first step of trust is really that loving relationship that Naomi showed her. And through that begin to see a loving relationship of God. And so here, the point I want to make is this. Love makes trust easier, does it not? Love makes trust easier. We tend to trust those who love us and we feel are safe to us. We're willing to give them more of a benefit of doubt. We're willing to do what they ask us to do. And that's what God intends to do here. God intends to show Ruth, this foreigner, that he's not just some exclusive Israelite God, that he's God of the universe and that he loves Ruth very much. And so Ruth, in verse 16, replies and says to Naomi, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us. And when Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. In other words, she's like, okay, you're coming with me. Ruth said, Naomi, don't tell me to leave because I'm not leaving. I'll go wherever you go. I will die, you die. In fact, your God will be my God. And so in this, what you begin to see with Ruth is the goodness of not only of her mother-in-law that she adores very much, which is Naomi, but the goodness of Naomi's God, the one true living God, by which she begins to see his love as well and begins a life of trust. And so what you see here is this significant shift in the life of Ruth. Orpah decided to go and do what was easy, go back to her people, go back to their gods. But Ruth said, no, I want to lean into the one true God and lean into and go with Naomi wherever she goes. And through that, what you see is Ruth's life changes forever in her relationship with her God. And not only that, but you will see through this journey that we're going to go through is that God is always with her. God is always, loves her. And again, spoiler alert, she never becomes queen. She never becomes this great thing and all that sort of stuff, right? That we all think that every single person who turns their life to God all of a sudden should automatically become great. No. She just becomes a wonderful woman who you'll see God takes care of her life, and you'll see great joy in her life. That maybe life isn't so much meant to be about being great, but as much as enjoying the God and learning how to trust him and being grateful for where he puts us, the people that he surrounds us, to love one another and to use the little gifts that he gives us to go and to love him and to go love other people as well and to enjoy those things, as we will see that Ruth does. And so the point here is this: life with the great God is better. Life with our great God is so much better than greatness with no God. In fact, when you see and you read the book before that, you'll be incredibly depressed. Go read Judges. You'll end it and go, oh my goodness, this is horrible. You know why? Because what you see a group of people who turn away from the goodness of God because they want to be great. And wanting to be great, they take everything in control in their own hands. And you know what they do is they mess it up. And they become even more vile and more violent and more ugly and all of that. Can that happen to a country who follows God and then all of a sudden decides that maybe all this good things that God's given us is really us and because of our greatness, and now we take control of everything and now we go live our life to show the whole world how great we are? Can something like that make a country then become very volatile and divisive and hurtful towards each other and to humanity? Can that ever happen? Yeah, of course it can happen. But the thing is, what you always see is this beautiful thing of Ruth. That even average people, sometimes what we tend to do is we tend to think, well, then the solution to this is we need better judges. But what we find here is the way that God works is a different way. That the world begins to change when just people like you and I are average, who just go, you know what? Let's just go follow our God. Let's just go trust him. Let's go build relationships with him. Yeah, we can pray for leaders and things like that, and we should. But you know what? Instead of praying for a leader to do everything for us and depend on a leader, why don't we just begin to depend on our God in our own personal lives? So that's what you see with Ruth. In this ugly political situation, you just see this beautiful young lady who begins to find her way to God and begins to trust God in a beautiful way. And then what you begin to see is God works through that. God works through that. You know, Ruth had a great grandson. You know what his name is? It's David. He became a king. And you know what? He was a really humble king. And you know what? Ruth had a great grandson. I don't know how many greats, but it's great. A lot of greats in there. And guess what he became? The King of all kings, Jesus Christ. Now, did Ruth do all these things because she wanted to be great and have that great lineage? No. She just did it because she wanted to love the Lord. And that's all God wants from us. He doesn't want us to be great. He wants us to know that he's great. And we can come and come under his wings and enjoy him and trust him and live a life of trust and let him show us his goodness and his grace to us. A couple of questions I want to leave you with. And the first one is this. And I want you to ponder this. Is life to be defined by what I pursue? Is life to be defined by what I pursue? Or must my pursuit be defined by what life was meant to be? Let me say that again. Is life to be defined by what I pursue? Greatness. I pursue greatness. So is that how my life is to be defined? Is my life to be defined by my career? Or must my pursuit be defined by what life was meant to be? I tell you what, you answer that question in 2020, man, you're going to have a good year no matter what happens to you. Once you realize what is life meant to be. John Piper said it this way that I always liked how he said it this way. God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. In other words, what is life meant to be? Is to be most satisfied in the God who loves us, who's given us eternal life, who graces us with his love even when we're boneheads and we mess things up. Life is meant to pursue him. And one last question too before we wrap it up here. Let me ask you this. If you haven't already, are you willing to give God a shot into leading your life? You know, are you willing to give him, your life, like an arrow and let him shoot it the direction where he wants to go? Are you willing to kind of say, okay, God, I trust you. I'm getting to know you. I see that you're good, that you're love, that nobody who is good and loving would never send their son to sacrifice their life for me, but you did that because you love me. Are you willing to give him a shot, to let him lead and guide your life and to teach you what life is meant to be? You allow him to do that, 2020 is going to be a very different deal. There's a lot of us are going 2020, vision 2020. We got a clear vision for greatness for the end of this year. Man, maybe this year, maybe this will be the year of taking a deep breath and maybe just learning what life was meant to be and enjoying the God who made you. Be very curious to see what your life would be at by the end of 2020. I think what God would say is he would say it would be joyful and peaceful, and you will have a beautiful relationship with him and with other people as well. The band's going to come out and they're going to sing a song. And while they sing this song, you can sing to it. You can just sit there and meditate to it and just listen to it. But I want you to kind of think through those questions as they sing this song. It's called Greater Things. And in it, it's not so much about us asking God to make us a greater thing. It's really about trusting him to do the great things that only a great God can do. And we take great joy and delight in that, and even healing as well. Let me pray. Father, I thank you so much that you love us, that we're not perfect, we mess things up, but yet you still love us. And I'm grateful as well that, we don't have to strive to be great. We don't have to, worry about whether our life is significant or not. Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it may not be significant. But you know what? We matter to you. When David said, what is mere mortals? Why? Why do you think about mere mortals? What is that to you? It means everything to you, God. We mean everything to you. God, I pray that this year that we would take 2020 as a remembrance that we mean everything to you. That we would live this life in close connection to you and trust in you and love in you. And so as we listen to this next song, God, remind us of your goodness and our need to trust in you and trust in your name for great and beautiful things. It's in your son's name I pray.